This is Misty's. This is Genesis chapter 38 of the KJ3, and it happened that time that Judah went down away from his brothers and turned aside to a man of Adullam, his name Hurrah. And Judah saw there a daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua, and he took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name And she conceived again, bore a son named Onan. And she continued still and bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. And he was at Chizib, and she bore him. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name Tamar. And Judah's firstborn son, Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Jehovah, and Jehovah caused him to die. And Judah said to Onan, "Go in to your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up seed to her brother." And Onan knew the seed would not be his. And it happened, when he went in to his brother's wife, he wasted his semen to the ground, not giving the seed to his brother. And what he did was evil in the eyes of Jehovah, and he also caused him to die. And Judah said to his daughter-in-law, "Tamar, live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah is grown," for he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and lived in her father's house. And the days were many, and the wife of Judah, the daughter of Shua, died, and Judah was comforted. And he went up to the shears of his flocks, he and his friend Hurrah of Adullam, to Timnah. And Tamar was told, saying, "Behold, your brother-in-law is going to Timnah to shear his flocks." And she took off her widow's robes from her, and veiled herself in a veil, and disguised herself. She sat at the entrance of the fountains, which is on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up, and had been given to him for a wife. And Judah saw her, and he thought her to be a prostitute, because she had not veiled her face. And he turned aside to her by the roadway, and say, "Come now, let us come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give me, or that you may come into me?" And he said, "I will send a kid of goats from the flock." And he said, "Will you give me a pledge until you send it?" And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" And she said, "Your signet ring, and your bracelet, and your staff in your hand." And he came into her, and then she conceived by him. And she rose up and left, and took off her veil from her face, and she put on her widow's robes. And Judah sent the kid of goats by the hand of his friend Dulamite to receive the pledge of the woman's hand, and he did not find her. And he asked the men of her place, saying, "Where is the prostitute that was at the fountains by the roadway?" And they said, "There was no prostitute here." And he returned to Judah and said, "I have not found her." Also the men of the place said, "There was no prostitute here." And Judah said, let her take them for herself, that he was not become a laughingstock. See, I sent this kid, and you did not find her. And after 3 months it happened, it was told to Judah, saying, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has committed adultery. And also, behold, she is pregnant by fornication." And Judah said, "Bring her out, and let her be burned." She was being brought out. She sent to her father-in-law, saying, "I am pregnant by a man to whom these belong." And she said, "Notice how whose are these, the signet ring, the bracelet, and the staff?" And then Judah knew and said, "She is more righteous than I, because I did not give her to my son Shelah." And he never knew her again. And in the time of her bearing, behold, it happened, twins were in her womb. And in her bearing it happened that one put forth a hand, and the midwife took it and tied crimson on his hand, saying that this one came out first. And it happened as he withdrew his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, how have you broken a break for yourself? And one, his name was Pharez. And then his brother came out, and on whose hand was the crimson, and the one called his name Zerah.